All right, welcome to Shipped, the AI podcast for businesses. My name's Cameron. I'm here with Alex, my co-host, and we do this every day. And our job is to take the newest, shiniest information in the AI world, digest it, and make it presentable for business owners and people within businesses to enlighten things that are actually usable and actually relevant to you as a person operating a business. So everything's working at a breakneck speed. That's the AI space in a nutshell. It's moving a million miles a minute. Alex, how are you feeling about the space in general right now before we just get into the topics?
Oh, it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, every single day. I mean, we got Claude dropping new features. Seems like every single day at the moment. Lots of different transformations for businesses actually realizing the ROI now after a couple of years of investing into it. And I mean, some of it just feels magical. I mean, voice AI. Think a couple of years ago, could you even chat to AI with a voice? And now it sounds like a human. Scary smart sometimes, but really interesting.
Yeah, it's incredible. And like I mentioned, our job is to filter through those things and show anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening, what is actually applicable to your business. So the first thing I want to talk about is Claude. And I know that's a shock because it's always at the head of any AI news right now because they're updating things every single day. It feels like I'm updating my Claude app. But Anthropic just shipped Claude Managed Agents, right? Basically, the no code automation killer is what people are saying. One prompt runs your whole workflow end to end. So the question is N8N done? Is Zapier done? Are all these no code visual automation softwares dead? What do you think about that?
Personally, I think not at the moment. Just to caveat that, I think not at the moment. The reason for that is because I think it's an incredibly useful tool, and I think many people get lots and lots of benefits out of it. And it can do a lot of what N8N, Made.com, Zapier, that you would pay an extra license for, does natively. The main concern that I see for a lot of businesses at the moment is, at least in its current configuration, you're then vendor locked. So you can't switch between the different platforms, the different providers, and it's almost designed to be a bit more technical versus sort of co-work, which again by default would be a bit more native to businesses. So I think it's something that's a great starter for 10. I think it's something that will definitely increase over time. It's just not quite, I think, a whole rounded product for lots of other people. If we could connect in our own open source models to be able to run it a bit more cheaply, because again, if you're trying to get Opus 4.6 as a business owner to respond to every email coming through,
Mm.
your
Yeah.
costs are just going to ramp extortionately as they go through. But it's really interesting that now that I mean, they took so much money off, OpenAI and all these other
Mm.
companies at the enterprise level. So it's really interesting to see that's the direction they're funneling it all into and getting inspired by, I would say, more OpenClaw versus N8N, Make.com, Zapier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not that long ago, ChatGPT, OpenAI, they had a stranglehold on the market. They had a 50% stranglehold on the market, and the newest numbers I saw recently were 25%.
Mm.
So Claude has definitely clawed their way into the market, taking over a lot of market share from ChatGPT without a doubt. So do you think it's from a cost perspective, that's kind of where you're coming at it from? Do you think that's the biggest issue here, or do you think it is like just the usability?
I mean, most businesses have between two and three models typically switched on within their organization, especially as you start to get to some of the larger ones. So I think it depends on how free they let us be with the sort of tool to actually use it. And it is great that they did have like the API integrations, the webhook integration, so you can still trigger it in many, many different ways and connecting the different apps. I just,
Mm.
if I look at some of the larger scale organizations versus the smaller ones, would I really want to be locked into one platform that has everything and I can't switch between the different ones? I know we're going to touch on it later for Mythos, but what if Spud, which is rumored to be coming out from OpenAI, was 10 times as good as Mythos?
Mm.
Well, then how do I switch across that without being locked
Yeah.
in? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the really interesting thing though is also slightly contextualizing how far Anthropic have come. I know we just mentioned some of the figures, but they're now at a 30 billion run rate. I mean, they added 4 billion in January, 7 billion in Feb, I think it was, and they've got over 1,000 businesses spending over $1 million annually on the platform. So when you've got that large scale data basically flowing through, how could you not basically come to that forefront, whether it be the models or how businesses actually use it day to day? And let's face it, they may not be targeting the small businesses, but the enterprise people, give them the insights, give them the vast amount of data they need to then have it trickle back down to the small businesses so we can use it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to echo what I said before, everyone's saying Claude Agents kills no code automation, right? But I feel like what nobody's really asking is when the agent breaks at 2 a.m., right? Who fixes that? In N8N, you can see every node. Uh, and Claude is a little bit of a black box, right, for a lot of people. And I think that's the edge that people who know N8N, know Zapier, it's like they can see a layer deeper. And the same thing goes for developers who know code, right? They can see a layer deeper than N8N. So my question is there is, who is fixing that? Because I don't think just an admin person, someone who's just loosely using Claude Code can be that person to fix those issues.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's where you and I and the AI for business, community and space that we've got really plays into that strength because I think, yes, over time, Claude itself will be able to fix its own problems and just get better that way. But you are still going to need the specialist. I mean, think back to prompt engineering, right? We used to be able to start off with just having a couple of quick questions here and forth, and that's how everyone used it. But then we found all of these tips and tricks to get much better outputs from it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be the equivalent for the agents, for the guardrails of setting up, the policies of how to actually use it, the training, fine tuning, like all of these different parts that if you just switch it on out the box, I can imagine a lot of people would get 50, 60, maybe even 70% of the value, but not that full 90, 100% that they would be looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's also an architecture thing as well, because while anyone can kind of open up Claude Code, they can say, "Hey, build me this thing." How that fits into the architecture, whether it's a new business or an existing business, I think that's where the trend is going. It's system-minded people and how they use these tools to build the correct systems.
Yeah, it could. I love that point because I think it relates to a study that came out last year, which is they found that there's more. So, creative space, marketing, that whole department used to be really left brain. So, it used to be really
Mm.
creative. How can you bring? But now they found there's more right brain data analytical roles coming through for that exact same
Mm.
department because you need to know click through rate, you need to know how to set up funnels and how the steps work, all these different parts that tie into some of the marketing side. So I could imagine that you'd almost get maybe specialists, individuals within a business to help with that for their department. But to be honest, do you really want a CEO every single day trying to set up a brand new automation? Probably not. You would still want a person or team dedicated to actually orchestrating everything
Yeah,
and
yeah,
making sure
yeah.
that it runs day to day.
That's actually super interesting, and I didn't actually know that the whole left brain versus right brain thing, because I guess I come from a creative space, right? And I kind of transitioned into that right brain way of thinking. I became a systems thinker. I wasn't born a systems thinker. I was born more of a creative person, and I think what has happened in the past couple of years has allowed people like me who are more, I guess, left brain orientated and more from a marketing background in that creative space to begin thinking in a more right brain type of way and be able to more visualize these systems, right? Because back in the day, maybe you were just building all in code, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard to visualize these systems, but now you can kind of go into Claude and be like, hey, my whole stack, all my inputs and outputs, can you visualize this for me? And so for someone like me, that actually helps quite a bit. But we've built so many things in and between us, right? You've probably built thousands of things. I've built hundreds of things. Um, and if Claude can now do the whole thing in one shot, is the uh, will the whole category die or just kind of the top layer die? Like, how do you think N8N can actually survive, or Zapier? How can they survive through this?
I still think that they're incredibly competitive in the market. They'll need to change their pricing accordingly because, of course, if this is all wrapped up in a bundle or the API sort of cost, as we mentioned, if that's how they're going to run it, like you would if you were trying to tie it to OpenClaw, I think that's where it'll be interesting from a cost to compute or cost to get the output point of view.
Yeah.
Also, you don't need AI to do everything. It can help with a lot of things, but sometimes it is just simple automation. So if I'm looking at that from a N8N, Zapier, Make.com point of view, I think at some point we're going to end up where they're all converging together, all trying to do the same things, all trying to get the same outputs. Because
Yeah.
let's face it, business owners don't care about the tool. They care about, does it do the thing I want it to do? Yes or no. Does it give me the output? Yes or no. So I think that's where it would be interesting to see where, yes, I think it will take business away from them because of how easy it is to do. But then you could argue the same for Claude Cowork. What's the difference between that and managed agents in the future? Could all of this just come together for Claude automation, for example, and that's what they release? Or to steal the name from Microsoft, does it become Claude Power Platform, Claude Power Automate? Does it become a one-stop shop for them?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you made regarding kind of shoehorning AI into things. Obviously, it's the most hyped thing in the world right now, right? In the business space is AI. And I'm sure people come to you, people come to me, and they're like, how can I integrate AI into my business? And the first thing that I'm asking is, what problems are you actually trying to solve here? What is the starting point? What is the midpoint? What's the end point? And often I end up saying to them, hey, this doesn't even need an AI agent. It's only going to complicate things, right? We just need a pipeline that efficiently sorts the things that you need sorted to create the end result that you desire. And that's going to be probably going to be cheaper because you're not using AI tokens. And it's probably going to be more reliable because, still as of April 16th, 2026, hallucination still exists. We are not hallucination free in the AI space. How are you seeing those types of interactions in within your clients?
No, I agree. I mean, hallucination is still a thing to be wary of. I mean, it's nowhere near what it used to be in the past. That I think that cost of compute thing is really going to be the main thing, as well as the vendor lock-in that we mentioned in the past as well. So it'd be interesting to see how it develops. The other side of that is the security and risk point of view that I think would be really interesting. I know that we've got, GDPR, the ISO compliance, we've got SOC, all these different parts. If you just turn it on so that anyone can turn on an automation and there's no controls around it, then what's that going to do to a business? Could you end up leaking your own Claude code again, like they did the other week? You don't have that procedure in place. I think it comes back to, there was a really good thing from BCG that came out earlier this year, which was a 10-20-70 framework. So you should spend 10% of your time on the tool, the AI part of it, 20% on the data in your business. How do you actually get the most out of it? What does it need to train the model? But 70% of your time should be spent on the people and the process. Because if you're not actually redesigning process flows to actually embed and natively use AI versus plugging something over the top, the orders of magnitude for the outcomes you achieve, the efficiency you achieve, it's just like a chasm between those that have it and those that don't. I know we'll touch on PwC a bit later, but it is going to be interesting to see that space of, is everyone just going to overcomplicate plug-in AI for the sake of AI, like you said earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because Claude has made about 7 different updates in the past 7 days, another really interesting update is Claude Routines, automations that run overnight on Anthropic servers while you're offline, right? Your computer doesn't even need to be on. Okay. Is this the first real AI does your job while you sleep feature? Or do you think it's just, I guess, a fancy cron job?
I would say the latter more than anything else. I think, again, it's a step in the right direction. It's fantastic. I think that OpenClaw release earlier this year really woke a lot of people up to the capabilities of AI nowadays, but also how you can get it to be your assistant to complete specific parts, the good and the bad, the ugly, that all happen with OpenClaw. It really opened its eyes to a lot of people. The routine part specifically, I mean, it's just another aspect of automation within the tool. For I think the everyday user, it's going to become really confusing for why would I use loop versus routine versus schedule for all of these similar sounding cron jobs at the end of the day, unless you, like you and I, you're really embedded in the space, know the difference, know why you would use the different ones to get the outputs that they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Claude routines are really easy to set up. I set up a few myself to just test it out because with any of these things, you just got to get your hands on it and see how it operates because you got to be able to see through the hype, right? And I set up, a couple simple things like, checking my emails, creating a report, going through my diary entry, seeing what maybe I missed the previous day that I need to do today, and generating a little dot point list for that. And it right now for me personally, it's not replacing any type of process that I've already got in place with whether it's old N8N automations that I've built or some new bots that I've implemented within my Claude network. Do you see it replacing anything for you, or do you think what's at least right now what is currently available with your previous automations are doing the job?
No, I think it's similar. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the Claude co-work that I've got running in the background as well does a similar job just on the scheduled triggers that they've got. I know the routine is much more advanced for what you can do with it, but like you say, unless you're going down the rabbit hole for specific business processes, checking your email, checking your calendar, notifying you, if that client meeting coming up, doing some scraping beforehand, you can do similar things already within the tool. I suppose the question back to you would be, do you think this could be the start of maybe feature bloat or something like that within Claude, where they keep adding features for the sake of adding features versus, like routines? Why not just take schedules, make schedules like 50,000 times better, and then just run that instead?
Well, to be honest, I think this is where it just comes down to marketing.
Yeah.
I think they're adding as many sexy things as they could possibly add, to this package. So it is undeniable. I think that's what they're trying to make Claude. They're trying to make it this undeniable force. At the end of the day, right, when we look at the real big picture, the winner will be whoever reaches true AGI first, because the compounding recursive learning that will take place from that point onwards will be kind of impossible to catch up to, in my opinion. So while all of these things are fantastic, I think that is the trajectory we are on, is bloat. We are currently bloating. If we went through the list of current Claude features, how many of them do I use on a daily basis versus how many do I just never use? I'd have to make a list and to give you an accurate depiction of what that looks like. But for the most part, I can guarantee, like, I'm not probably using the majority of the features within it. But nevertheless, I'm still, getting the job done because, again, of the experience of knowing how to use N8N, knowing how to connect things in many different ways. And, I think that's the trade-off when a business goes to hire someone is, are they just going to hire someone who is going to, say things into Claude, or are they going to hire someone who actually kind of knows the behind the scenes? Going back to what we were talking about before, and what type of problems will businesses face in that aspect? Because the difference in hiring someone who is like a prompt engineer, I'm using that term quite loosely, who's just talking to Claude Code versus someone who understands the architecture and understands it on a deeper level, is probably tens of thousands of dollars. So from an SMB level perspective, do you think they are going to face significant issues if they choose the former?
I think it always helps to get an expert to come in and advise or just, do a sense check for any of this that comes through. I mean, touching on that point as well, for knowing everything going on in the market, I mean, if you didn't know, for example, about Obsidian and the new Karpathy RAG that they released, it's not
Mm.
really RAG, but kind of the entire framework that you could use from that, that could be all you need versus having to set up maybe a light RAG versus having Pinecone versus Superbase. So I think, like you say, having that expert advice or kind of people in the industry help see that holistic picture, how to use it, where to use it, the training versus just, oh, I'll turn on Claude, they got a new feature, or I'll turn on this, it's got a new feature, and not really seeing that same return that comes back.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of hype around things like Paperclip. I don't know
Yeah.
if you've used Paperclip at all, but essentially, for anyone listening that doesn't know what Paperclip is, it's essentially like an aggregation of agents that are running at all times and doing various tasks, right? It's an agent hub, I guess you could say. And I've heard CEOs of major companies talk about how they want to replace their CFO, their CMO, like every single department with a particular agent doing particular things. But that's where I think we are right now in a space that comes down to bloating right now. Because I'll tell you what, who's actually using Paperclip in a super meaningful way in a really big business? I couldn't tell you one, if I'm being honest. I think it's cool? Yes. But for me personally, again, it's kind of like routines, right? I've got other things that are already doing the things that I need. If I need a research agent, I've got a research agent. I don't need to be, having it in a whole separate system. An app like Paperclip is competing against, these massive companies like Claude, like Anthropic, like OpenAI, who are going to do the same thing anyway. That's basically what managed agents is, essentially. I think that's kind of the point where we are right now. That's that's the key takeaway is we're in a space of bloat
Yeah.
right now, but also obviously in a space of intense innovation, and that's just a byproduct of that, I believe.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really interesting point around the, paperclip, that organizational design is a AI embedded AI or augmented supporting business. Does it have fundamentally the same structure that we would want for the CEO, CFO, COO, CHRO, all these different roles and the teams underneath them? Or is it a completely different new, almost like spider network structure that everyone's talking to everyone, really flat hierarchy, just outcome driven versus hierarchy driven to get the outputs? And could that benefit some organizations in different industries versus others? For example, if you look at insurance or highly regulated industries, I could imagine you still want that approval flow. You don't want AI going off and doing everything. But if you're in marketing, why wouldn't you have your CMO talk to a CFO, to an operations team, just to ship everything as quickly as possible and provide that best service for, whatever your client may be?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ripple effects we could see from this perspective we're kind of looking at, which is specialists, right? We've got agents that are specializing in particular things. So maybe not a CMO agent, we're talking about an ad copy
Yeah.
agent. We're talking about an ad statistic agent. We're talking about a content agent, right? And I think, and maybe this is a hot take, I don't know, I think the traditional C suite structure will actually go under a bit of a revision in the next 10 years. And things are going to be more specialist focused. And I know that's kind of how it was back in the day in some companies, back in the 80s. It kind of developed into this traditional C suite structure we see today for the past however many decades. But I could see it going down that route through the reflection, through the looking glass of these AI agents, because that's kind of how we're building them right now. And how we're getting the best results from AI agents is them being specialists in particular tasks, skills, right?
Yeah. No, no, I
So
100% agree. I think it would be. I agree with you that it will be redesigned. I don't think we're getting rid of the C-suite anytime anytime soon. Mainly because of the accountability and everything that needs to sit around AI. But like you say, maybe there are parts that we don't need humans to do as much, and there is some of the
mhm,
replacement going on, which we can touch on with some of the job reports that came out. But there's
yeah,
also the fundamental, can it just augment and help people to get the best outputs, like customer service? Yes, it could do that first line triage of response to the low complexity stuff, but actually we still need people to do the high complexity, at least at the
yeah,
moment. can the AI then support those agents to provide the responses back? And it's, that sort of dynamic that we've got for C-suite, middle management, teams doing it every day. I think that's kind of what we'll see in the short term, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the way businesses are structured right now, so many businesses are locked into particular SaaS companies, right?
Mm.
HubSpot, for example, a lot of companies are locked into HubSpot. And personally, in terms of using their native agents, it still requires a lot of tweaking and tinkering, and it's all reliant on the knowledge base, right? So, number one, if it's not in the knowledge base, it's not going to be effective. And rightly so, because you don't want it inventing things. But at the same time, it can't really handle super complex tasks. And I've dealt with that firsthand very, very recently. Um, but, anyways, Claude number three, okay, Anthropic released Mythos to certain enterprise companies, right? And the whole AI world seems to be losing their minds about Mythos. Obviously, you mentioned Spud as well. They kind of feel like OpenAI kind of had to be like, "Hey, we're developing Spud. Um,
Yeah.
we're doing this as well." Um, but they had to release it to these enterprise companies, right? Because if it goes into the hands of the average user at the same time as it goes into the hands of these enterprise companies like AWS, for example, which runs whatever percent of the world's data centers and data in general, there's going to be exploits, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be all these holes, these cybersecurity issues. Uh, but the general public, normal folk, me and you, we don't have access to this yet. And who knows when we'll have access to it. Is this something that businesses should be worried about? Is it something they should be excited about? And will it change the way we function and businesses function?
I mean, fundamentally, I think marketing and Anthropic, they've done it again. Why wouldn't you say we've got a doomsday AI that's released tomorrow and it will destroy the world if we release it to the public? What better press release are you going to get than something like that to get all of the
Yeah.
attention around it? I mean, if you look at all of the system card stats, what it's come through, it is incredibly impressive what it's able to achieve. I think the broader question, sorry, before I get down the rabbit hole,
No,
is
that's fine.
is there going to be a divergence between, like you say, super closed source models for the enterprises versus what
Mm.
everyone else gets access to? Because I think that could be something that, like you say, I mean, having Cisco and all of the large companies that they mentioned on their report, maybe if they're spending over $1 million a year, maybe they're getting these extra perks for closed, super closed models that no one else is going to be able to touch. But I agree, if that model, as it sits at the moment, was released to the public, it does look like it's going to cause chaos overnight. So it'll be, I think it's one of those things which is, it's a great step forwards. Absolutely love it. I'd be interested to see the hype versus, the actual, clear parts that we're hoping to see at the end of the day. But again, it comes back to the point of, do I need an AGI or super intelligent system to respond to an email? No. Can it help me maybe potentially redesign my business, big picture thinking, all these different parts that we would want from a supermodel? Yes. So I think that's where the balance is going to be for, actually fantastic having these latest advancements. I really want it to come, feed the learnings into Opus 4.7, 4.5, whatever it may be for that next iteration. But I don't think everyone needs a mythos for everything they do in their business. But yes,
Yeah.
do read about it.
No, absolutely. And that actually leads me into the next question, which is in terms of like day to day work, uh, in terms of day to day work within a business, uh, are we really seeing that much of a difference at this point, from your perspective, in these small to medium businesses between, let's just say, Sonnet 4.6 versus Opus 4.6? Will the day to day change as it kind of flatline in terms of most business operations?
I think most people don't know they exist. If I'm if I'm honest, if you look at ChatGPT, if we just touch on that for a second, how many people go into the top left hand corner, click on ChatGPT 5.4, activate thinking, go back to any of the previous models. Same with Claude. I don't think many people go down to the bottom left, even know what Sonnet, Haiku, or Opus actually are, the difference between them. I think a lot of them, again, it comes back to the, do I get the output? Do I get the response I want? Am I happy with it? Yes or no? That's where a lot of people actually sit with AI today. And yes, there are definitely some power users within businesses that know the ins and outs of this. But I think for most people, at least from what I've seen, varies from company to company, industry, but some of them still treat it like a Google search. Put a quick
Mm.
sentence in, get a quick sentence out, and then, don't have these extra parts enabled.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the average worker, they don't care what is behind the scenes.
No.
They just care about, does this do the job well? Does it make my life easier? And I think that goes all the way up the chain, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there's some really, forward-thinking people, some maybe not for experimental CEOs out there that are wanting to inject this into their business at a breakneck pace, but and kind of disregard the negatives to it because they know it's gonna get there, and I respect that because I do. We're in the same boat, right? That's why we're here,
Yeah.
because we believe it's gonna get there, and for people like us, we have made it be there through the knowledge we've learned throughout the years we've been doing this. But when it comes to, I guess, implementing these things in a business successfully, implementing these AI models, which ones are you gravitating towards right now? Because of, I guess you could say, people are wanting the best things. They're always wanting the best and shiniest, newest thing. Are you having to come into these conversations and be like, hey, look, I don't think we need this. I think we should be doing this instead?
I think the first thing that I see the most at the moment is I keep getting job specs come across, or sorry, information for jobs to go that are someone's typed it into ChatGPT. This is what I want the output to be, and then it tells me what it thinks it should be. And I think the most dangerous thing for that is it doesn't have that big picture from what I've seen at the moment. It can be incredibly useful for giving suggestions in that way,
Mm.
but most people haven't asked all of the questions in the right way to really know the output they're trying to actually achieve with it. Again,
Yeah.
when it goes through to that implementation, like we mentioned, I normally get a lot of people coming through and saying, I want Claude, I want ChatGPT,
Mhm.
I want this, I want that, when actually we should be taking that step back and going, but what's the problem it's solving? Because if we're not saying the problem it's solving, we don't know what data we need, we don't know, yes, what tool we need to use, but also we don't know how your process and actual systems need to sit around that. Because again, when I work with, large enterprise sort of banks and financial institution, they're not going to rip out systems that have been there from the 80s, the 70s, that are legacy infrastructure just to plug in a Claude code at the moment. Again, they could do that at the moment, but it's got so much data in there they can't. So I think that's where you're going to see the smaller, medium-sized businesses. They can be so much more nimble with this tech, embedding it and using it and getting the most out of it. But they still need to look at first, get a quick win, simple process automation, actually explain to the team how to write an email, how to do skills, how to do simple things within the tools they've already got. Then go to the second stage of how do we reinvent all of the business processes to use AI in it natively versus putting a tool over the top. Like you said about HubSpot, could that be that you rip out HubSpot, save yourself a fortune on license cost, and build your own version with Claude code over the space of a weekend? That is now feasible. And then the last thing is, sorry, the last thing is
No,
just,
you're good.
businesses look at it from that bottom line cost optimization at the moment. But actually, yes, it's fantastic at that. It's what automation has done for many, many years. UiPath, Blue Prism, all these tools that have been around for ages. But now AI is unlocking that top of funnel. So how can we have a new business offering to bring customers in, like we saw with Harvey AI? That's where I'm starting to see a lot of conversations come through saying, for example, in the legal space, I'm not going to be able to charge £200 a month, an hour, whatever it may be, to complete a service that an AI
Mhm.
can do in 10 minutes. What we
Yep.
need to do is have both. We will have a low cost to serve potentially option with the AI, but still my, personalization, my specialist conversation that we can have for that nature nurture conversation for the future. And that's where I think the future of work will be more augmented with AI, supported with AI. You may not need 1,000 people in your business to do 1 billion a year. You may just need 30 people in the business, 20 people in the business to get those same outputs.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the bigger the business, the more infrastructure that needs to be adjusted, that needs to be pulled apart, the more risk there is to, I'm sure, the massive amount of employees and clients. The risk to reward for a lot of these massive companies isn't there yet. But I'm sure we will be there in the near future. And talking about enterprise businesses, talking about big business, 80,000 tech jobs gone in Q1 of 2026. And every report says AI driven restructuring, right? More tech workers were laid off in Q1 in 2026 than all of 2023 combined. And that is the new language that we're seeing. AI driven restructuring is now the default phrase on these filings. What is your feeling around that?
I mean, we're starting to see the realizations of, I would say, AI being used in the business, yes, but I would also say it's the negative light of AI within some of the media outlets as well for what AI is. Because if you actually read a lot of the in depth elements of not just this aggregator report that came out, but from lots of other ones as well, they're actually looking at how do they streamline a lot of the business functions that are running day to day. I mean, if you look at, for example, like Twitter, with the thousands of employees that they had, and now they've got, significantly less, but they're still able to get the same outputs. And that's
Yep.
where I think a lot of organizations are looking at who do we need in the business to manage and who do we need in the business to do. So I think that almost glass kind of pear-shaped organization, they're looking at that middle run of the ladder going, how many managers of managers do we actually need versus how do we
Yep.
get, take their cost. If I could give, yourself, a coder, knows how to use Claude Code, if I could give you an extra $100,000 a year in API costs to run Claude constantly, I'm sure that you would get probably similar value out of that as you would by having all these different people. So I think it is starting to shift the workforce, and those that, I mean, it goes back to the old saying, right? You're not going to be replaced by AI at the moment. You're going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. And
Mhm.
that's where I
Yep.
think it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the first quarter where we're really seeing companies price AI replacements directly into their org charts,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of insane. Not that I think that's crazy, but I think it's insane that we're here at this point in time, right? The real test is which AI tools are actually doing the work there. How are these things actually formatted? And will we see this be successful? And again, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It comes down to the people in the operations position of the AI. You know, how are they structuring things? How are they architecturing the system that is being built around the company? Because again, if we're just throwing AI into a company with disregard, it's bound to fail.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I think what we'll start to see on sort of the flip side of that as well is I think we'll start to see a lot more of the like small and medium sized businesses spin up quicker that try and fight with some of these bigger companies because they can be a lot more nimble. So I
Yeah.
think it will just shift where some of those positions lie. But also, I think there'll be new roles that come to the market that help with this, discrepancy in the job market. Because
Mhm.
who was a social media in the 90s? No one, right? Nowadays, we've got social media as an entire business area, let alone just part of the marketing team. And that's where I think there could be, like we said about marketing, left brain, right brain, those new roles will pop up for people to really get embedded and use. It may not even be AI, just a new aspect within the business. I mean, there was one for Anthropic, which was, I think, about 500,000 a year they were paying USD, which was almost just like a philosopher, just testing the ideologies, working with different groups, trying to get the best outputs, checking for any biases, discrepancies, all these different parts. And I think that's the sort of stuff that we could start to see in the market versus you get a philosophy degree and you go down maybe the more educational route in the past, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're running a small or medium business and you just watched Oracle cut 30,000 people, um, you're looking at the talent pool that just opened up,
Yeah.
right? And, obviously these people, they're not necessarily valued how they were before, right? So the real question is, do you hire the human that is now at a cheaper valuation, or do you buy the AI tool that is supposedly replacing them? Or third option, again, the automations person or the AI person that is responsible for those automations and AI.
I think if you're looking at what you need to do with the business, of course, I'm going to pitch our own services here, and we can help you with that. But I think when I look at the market for what I would do in that situation is yes, there is a huge amount of talent that's now been released into the market. Some of it will be, very, very expensive to get hold of it, and some of it not quite as much. What I would look at doing is, again, what business problem are we solving? Where do we actually
Mm.
need the human in the loop, the human guide, the human hand to pull through versus actually being a pure automation AI tool that can do the same thing. If I look a lot in the job market at the moment, I know quite a few different recruiters out there. I mean, there's a lot of AI automation lead roles that are coming through to the market. So if you spent 20 years in a particular business, in a particular field, in a department that you know in and out, you could go through, specialize in AI, know all that information about it, and then bring that through to some of the small to medium sized businesses that are struggling in that particular field. Or if you are in that situation and you do have the viability through financial means and security for situations of living and everything like this, what if you started your own tool that could literally go through, I mean, not vibe coding in the sense of all of the aspects, but just try and spin something up just as a use case, a demo, because quite a few companies in the coding space, for example, are now asking to see your GitHub repositories, which they have done for a long time, but it's becoming more and more prevalent to see what can you do, what can your code do, what are some examples of outputs that you've produced, so we know how to use you best in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a gap right now between AI can do this task and AI can do this job,
Yeah,
right? And in Q1, this is the quarter where companies are not caring about the difference really clearly because we can see it in the statistics, right?
yeah.
And that's either brave or it's reckless. Um, and I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So how do you feel? Where do you think it lands? Is it brave? Is it reckless? Is it somewhere in the middle?
I think it really depends on the business and if you've thought it through. I know that there has been a lot of deliberations by C-suites and boards and leaderships within SMB businesses as well for what does that business look like in a couple of years. Like we mentioned for the legal team, they're going through a massive change at the moment for what does that
Yeah.
industry even look like in a couple of years. So I think it comes back to, again, what we're trying to solve, who do we need to do it, can the AI tool do it at the moment? No, for a lot of use cases, but yes, equally for a lot of specialized use cases, like you mentioned at the moment. And I think that's where we'll start to see that divergence of, like you said, process versus doing an actual entirety of a job. And that's where the augmentation, the job release, I think is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about AI replacing jobs, right? Microsoft just launched Agent 365, basically agents baked straight into Teams, Outlook, Excel, the whole stack, right?
Mm,
Which kicks off the obvious question. If you're a small to medium business today, what are the actual best AI tools to run your company on, right? Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all competing for the same seat. And I think we spoke about this just before. So, what's your perspective on that? Because essentially, companies are having to kind of bet on the stack.
yeah.
Because if something so influential, so game changing comes out in 6, 12, 18 months, and they're kind of being forced to drop their stack and move elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think I've been quite underwhelmed, I would say, by what Microsoft's achieved over the last couple of years for their
Yeah.
at least public releases. I mean, Copilot fell flat on its face for a lot of responses from businesses, and they're not happy with it at all. And considering that they're, quite a majority interest in OpenAI, which has 900 million users globally, I would have expected them to have taken hopefully some of that learning or worked with Sam Altman or the agreement that they've got with Anthropic, because you've now got Claude in Excel and all these different tools to bake that into their native stack as well. What I would
Yeah.
say for the everyday business owner is yes, unfortunately, at the moment you are locked into a particular stack. And that's where, if you are on the Microsoft sort of bandwagon versus the Google bandwagon, however you want to phrase it, Overall, I think Google is probably, well, not even close, leading in that space. They've got Nano Banana, they've got Anti-Gravity, they've got Gemini, some of the leading models, all these different parts being baked into their tools. So I think Microsoft do have some catching up to do. That doesn't mean that there aren't bad versions of it. You can still get some all right outputs from Copilot. You can now plug in tools into Microsoft, Word like we saw, Excel with Claude. So I think the native stack for 365 definitely has some catching up to do versus G Suite, but it just comes down to the specialist tools again.
Yeah. So if we were to do a mini tier list, let's just say the top three for businesses to implement to bet their stack on, right? Bet their livelihood on for the next 6 months. How would you rank that? I know I'm putting you on the spot a bit for that, but how would you? What does your brain go to for that?
Again, it goes back to that business problem that we're actually solving. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
jump to the tools, but if we were looking in the market at the moment, I mean, there's Claude is absolutely fantastic for a lot of different use cases, sounds incredibly human for the responses that you get back. They've now got the managed agents for the automation, so it's great to go down that rabbit hole. For image generation, I think Nano Banana 2 is still fantastic from Google. You can use that on a variety of different, platforms, including AI Studio within Google to get some marketing materials. The text is now really good. The photorealistic can be pretty good. So I would look at that. The video generation as well. I mean, Seedance 2 came out recently. So we're able to use that. Sorry, Seedream. Seedance or Seedream? I can never remember the difference.
See dance.
Yeah, C dance I think
I,
is the video. C dream is the video, isn't it? Sorry, the image. That's really good for the video point of view as well. I mean, you can now add reference, images as well as almost like animation flows. So if you want it to do a
Mhm.
particular walk or stuff like that, it's fantastic. I know your background is in marketing as well for some of the use cases there. I mean, HeyGen to help automate some of the social media,
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic if you want to use that as well. There's so many different tools to list off. Like you've got Gamma, which is a really nice quick win for turning on automated PowerPoint generation if you want to do that
Mhm.
as well. So again, what's the business problem you're solving? What's a quick win tool that you could use? What's your thoughts though? Are there any that you find that day to day are gravitating towards or deliberately avoid, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, like, I was hoping, I knew you'd give me a caveat answer, so I'm not surprised at the answer you gave. And it is the correct answer. I'm not gonna lie. It is the
Yeah.
correct, responsible answer to give. But in terms of my tech stack right now, I mean, Claude is obviously number one in my books right now. In terms of image and video, the Google is absolutely killing it, like you said. Nano Banana 2 is what I'm using on a daily basis when I want to create thumbnails, when I want to create any visual asset. So Google would definitely be in my second spot for usability. And then OpenAI is just kind of like my third backup, I guess you could say. So that's kind of how I would be ranking them personally. Uh, but I want to mention something which I think is kind of crazy with this whole Microsoft Agent 365 thing, which is they're giving AI agents employee badges. Now, what that means is a bit murky, but what I'm gathering from that is clear responsibility and access. And I want your opinion on the cybersecurity component of this and how you think this will play out.
I can imagine the employees weren't too happy to hear that it was being named exactly the same. I can imagine from a CIO, CSO sort of point of view in the background, it's probably because of permission levels, just to make it easier to control what the agents have access to, how they run through and do it. I mean, it's nothing new, right? We're giving agents personas to complete a specific task. Claude's been
Yeah.
doing it for ages. You could customize it with ChatGPT. You can do it with the open source models. I look at it as just, like we said a couple of times, is just how do we get the specialist agents to complete specialist jobs? We'll give them a
Yeah.
badge, we'll give them a name. I'm sure that there's some pleasing to the AI gods of the future, right? For we're treating you as equals. So yeah, be interesting to see how it plays out, that whole agent sphere. I mean, Google's been promising releases of agents and updated versions, and they do have some fantastic ones. So it'd be interesting to see how they compete.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to get into this too much, but the social implications of, making AI agents employees in some type of equal capacity, I'm sure that's going to ruffle some feathers for certain people. Like for me, I'm not precious about these types of things. But, a lot of people have a lot of ownership and pride in their job, and rightly so.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it could ruffle some feathers and make a lot of people upset.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see where that goes. But another really interesting thing that I've
Sorry,
noticed recently. Oh, yeah,
just
go.
on that point, just to expand on that as well, I think it'd be really interesting to see the global implications of the legislation for that as well, right? So
Yeah.
one of the major advantages of AI is it's not got that FTE, the full-time equivalent cost at the moment for headcount, vacation, all of these different parts that you need. So if you're then classing it as an employee, and then we have AGI at some point, does that then mean the holiday needs, the AI needs 2 weeks off a year to go on holiday to be switched off? Does it mean that
Yeah.
you then need a, 20% tax on that employee for the future? I know they've talked about that for the AI, replacement, augmentation stuff that's going through as well. So I think that employee specifically is, it's going to be interesting to see how that's responded to globally and what it could mean for, you know, how they're working businesses, the time off, like just run through.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on the political implications of how this is going to affect society as a whole, universal
Yeah.
basic income, job change, all that stuff, which we may do. But let's not get down that rabbit hole too deep because we could talk about it for hours. Um, but AI overviews Google AI overviews are killing traditional SEO, which I think is really interesting. 75% of Google searches now end with no click. That AI just answers it on the page within your chosen AI, right? Every small business that's built on organic traffic is in a bit of trouble, I would say. And most of them don't even know it yet, right? People aren't thinking about this. All they're seeing is, why isn't my Google traffic like it used to be, right? So where do you kind of see this going?
Yes, it's unavoidable the impact that it's had. I mean, you can look at Google Trends and kind of the ups and downs they've had on the curves there as well on some of the reporting of data. People I know have had their websites just fall off a cliff sometimes because they're not getting the same click through rate. I mean, if I look at it from two lenses, one is yes, 100% traditional SEO is, I would say, changing. It's not dead yet. It's definitely getting towards a next phase or whatever that may be. But I think the principles around SEO for keyword optimization and sort of how we can get that website, that web page, whatever it may be, to rank as best as possible is then of course being influenced into the AEO and the GEO that's now coming to the market, because of course all of those tools are based off scraping all of the data on the internet. So I'm
Mm.
sure there'll be some pay to play which will come through at certain points for that. But the new market is definitely from SEO across to more that GEO, AEO to actually figure out how to rank through recommendations on, you know, ChatGPT, Copilot, all these different, Gemini, all these different ones, exactly like the same as we now have for, lead enrichment tools. We can now do vibe prospecting and vibe lead identification, lead qualification by just typing in what we want and we get responses back. So I'm sure that's how it will go in the future.
So OpenAI just turned ChatGPT into the new Google. That's the buzzwords going around the internet right now. 100 billion ad business inside the chat window, essentially, right? This is the moment where AI stops being a tool and becomes a bit more of a media company in a sense. And once answers are sponsored, every recommendation a model gives carries an invisible price tag, which I think morally is a really interesting thing to kind of talk about. And it changes how we use AI in terms of the recommendations, right? Because as much as it's been like we like to believe it's pure and it's kind of like giving us the best results, we're kind of going to start transitioning into this ad space. So morally, just in terms of a usability, getting the best result, how do you view this transition taking place?
Yeah. So I think this actually really worries me, to be honest, because it was only a matter of time before AI became more of this pay to play game when it comes to, search recommendations, responses that we get back. I think the interesting, dilemma for the businesses though is how do we make sure that this paid content doesn't reinforce the learning of the, models that we're using versus the unpaid content? Because
Mm.
if they don't get this right now, well, if I'm a Google size enterprise and Apple size enterprise, and I put a couple of 100 million behind an ad budget, then well, hopefully that just gets embedded and is always recommended in the future because the model learns, well, if I recommend this tool, they click on it and I get a good response back. I think the other side of this as well though is, could it cause more search, the AI search engines to come back to the forefront of independent usage for, the mass
Mm.
majority versus, those that really know about it. So the likes of Perplexity, does this mean that, I know they start at a free tier and then they've got sort of $20 a month. Could there just be an even lower cost to serve, $5 a month just to get people on there, just so that you're getting purely objective responses back? And that's how people will then start to engage with the search mode of AI. Or actually you just kind of accept it's pay to play. Maybe they have a banner on it that says this is a paid advertisement, like we do with the search thing at the top for Google, sponsored whatever it says at the moment. And that's how it kind of goes through. It worries me as a consumer for the responses getting back, but for a business, I mean, it's pay to play as it always has been.
Yeah, and that's literally what I was going to say is that is the most straightforward solution to me is just having a sponsored tag there, maximum one, to be honest, like maximum one paid suggestion. Because anything more than that, I think is a little bit overwhelming. Maybe maximum two, I don't know. I think that's just going to be a testing process from the AI company side to see what users are willing to put up with, really. Uh,
I think it would be
that,
interesting to see from a human employment point of view, from, of course, OpenAI. Does this mean now they're going to, I wouldn't say slow down on the hiring of model sort of engineers, the AI engineers that they would have, but do they now start going after Google employees from the search department? Start saying, you know what, we just want your SEO team. We don't even care about the AI engineers as much anymore. Can we start bringing them across? Because they probably got a good model team that's already in there working away. I know there's some differences in the past, and that's why the Claude team left and loads of other people have left. But could that be the next step of the iteration that they need to bring it to the forefront? Because I don't think of anyone else having a market leading SEO team embedded in building the algorithm from scratch, right? It's not like Bing's caught up again. So be interesting to see.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So every SMB is they're already maxed out on at least what they can in terms of Google Ads, CPCs, and now OpenAI is opening a new auction essentially, right, inside ChatGPT. Would you say this is a relief for those businesses, or do you think it's two places they kind of can't afford to advertise and they're just going to be, competing against the big boys?
I think it's more the latter. They're going to be competing in two spaces now. You're going to have to do both, otherwise you'll get one more than the other. I mean, again, it comes back to the businesses for which one really has the best ROI for their investment. Some may find that actually being onto that platform of ad spend through OpenAI is what they want, or it could be Google, or to throw a third hat in the ring. What if you took that budget out of both and put it into the social media, the organic content that you could do with the hey gens, the clippy stuff that you can do with lots of different tools out there, so that you could generate UGC content on autopilot en masse about maybe your product or services, whatever you're doing. And if it's more of that B2C relationship, just plaster it all over Instagram or TikTok or all these different platforms, couple it with tools like ManyChat to have that automated interaction with customers, and then hand it over to a human at the point it needs. I think we're going to start to see very different go-to-market approaches for that, for where you really get the best ROI on that ad spend, if we want to put it that way.
Yeah, and I think the answer's somewhere down the middle, like it always tends to be, putting your eggs in multiple baskets.
Yeah.
I think organic content will have, not that it's gone away, it's gotten stronger and stronger as time's gone on. But I think there's going to be even more of a want for organic content moving into this space of AI. Because HeyGen just released their V5 of avatars, and this is in the last 24 hours. I haven't even had a chance to test it, but what I know is the major update is movement, is motion, right? And that is one of the big factors in clearly seeing whether something is AI or not. Because I gesticulate, I like
Yeah.
to gesticulate. And a lot of people do. They talk with their hands, and that is a major flaw in AI avatars right now. But we are going to be entering a space where, in the very near future, and look, I've been working with some professional people in the AI space who work with AI every single day. I've shown them some of my content that I've produced that is purely AI, and they're asking me, "Oh, you did the AI, you did the editing with AI, right?" And I say, "No, I did the whole thing with AI, the voice." The visual, every aspect of that is AI. Now that's obviously not going to pass the test across the board on
Mm.
every single person, because especially the younger generation, they're growing up with this, they have an eye for it, and they can understand it. And obviously there is a social pushback on AI content, especially in the arts, right? And I think rightly so, to a
Yeah.
degree. But when it comes to businesses, advertisements, I think that's where it will play a massive factor. And then looping it back into what I was saying before, having that true organic human pipeline that is assisted by AI,
Yeah.
I think is the ideal play, paired with those, fully AI advertised. So something really interesting I saw recently was Rocket just launched AI consultants that produce McKinsey-style strategy reports for an absolute fraction of the price. I'm talking like 1%, right? Or like a fraction of 1%. And that strategic thinking that used to be enterprise only is now in reach for every small business. So, what does that actually look like in the consulting industry, in your opinion?
I mean, I think the fundamental consulting way of working that it has been to date will go under change. I mean, there's no doubting there are some incredibly smart, talented people in the market that know it in and out and will give you significantly better responses than AI. I think the tools like that, and there's some for the VC market, the PE market, all helping you get the outputs, but they're all super dependent on the best inputs, right, to get the outputs.
Mhm.
So I could imagine that it would be you could, hire, use X, Deloitte, McKinsey, PwC, Bain, all these type of people to help with your internal business transformation. Or maybe there's a new lower, tier. Maybe they're all ex BCG people. Now they start their own business, or all ex Deloitte people using those tools to help you get the output. But it's still the report still needs to be actionable, and this is where I think it'd be really interesting to see, Rocket and the many others. We don't want to just replicate what Deloitte, all these other companies used to do. We want to make sure that you can actually help and use and embed. And I'm sure it's almost a lead magnet for some of the stuff they're doing. Don't get me wrong, the tool is incredible for what it can, theoretically achieve for businesses. But how do you act, like we said before, how do you actually embed it? How do you actually take action on what it's doing? You need someone to own and deliver that throughout the business. And I think what we'll start to see is, like that, get a high level insight, go through, get the output, but what do you actually do from it? And sorry, just on that as well, when you sit in the room and you do the workshops, with my Deloitte from with my background with Deloitte, part of it is just helping people within that organization see the bigger picture, or
Mhm.
not realize how different some of the business processes actually are from their theory versus reality. And there's, we don't want to just jump from put an input and AI gives you the output, because sometimes that entire discussion, the thought process, the movements of going through some of this AI discovery work really help you get clear as a business leader, business owner, what you actually want from AI, where you think it's lacking, but also as you go through, you really understand, maybe your business a bit more. You didn't realize what employees were doing versus thinking of doing. And actually, as you go through, you then can have that business case at the end that says, yes, this is where we're spending the most time. This is the potential benefits to the organization. And it's all data driven versus emotion driven.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see kind of all that coming through to the market.
Yeah, and like you said, you've worked, with Deloitte quite a bit. So you're viewing this as just, I guess, a tool to be used by these consultants, perhaps going into these consulting positions. It's just another tool in their wheelhouse.
I believe so. I think, Deloitte will come out with their own version, PwC will come out with their own version that goes and enables them to do it. I still think that it's exactly like the banking industry, right? We've got banks that are trying to get into technology, and we've got, technology fintechs that are trying to become more established banks. So I think we'll kind of just see this conversion at some point, and there'll probably be lots of M&A in this space in a year or two's time to help those businesses get the best outputs. But it's not as simple as here's a report that you can action. There's normally lots of other bits, not more sort of emotional as well as actual logical, to help get you those outputs at the end of the day. And to be honest, if you think you can just put one prompt in as one person and get the cure to your business, that is it's a very good,
Oh,
yeah,
it's
it's not,
optimistic. It's
yeah,
optimistic.
it's optimistic. It's definitely not going to be the reality because again, your CFO will challenge you, heads of departments will challenge you, the people that do it day to day will give you different realities. So you need that broad spectrum of thinking. And how do you know that the AI is not being biased in one sense than the other, unless you can see how have they developed that model? Can you change the model? Because again, you and I know ChatGPT will give you a very different answer to Claude, to Gemini, to DeepSeek. So then if I put the same answer in and get three different responses back, how do I know what's the right one? But long story short, that cost to serve, I think, will definitely change for how consulting works in the industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to simplify this to such a degree, but I do believe we're moving towards people being tastemakers,
Mm.
right? And I think that does apply to even consultancy as well, because, obviously having these tools available can help you deduce certain things. But you're right, whether that thing that the AI has deduced is correct is up to you as the professional, up to you as the tastemaker to decide whether that is true and that is worth pursuing. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the specialty of individuals will come into play and where people will still hold their worth is being able to decipher between what is good, what is a good output, what is a bad output, and like you said, the correct things to input into those systems.
But if you're looking at doing specific transformations where you get consultants in, right? So if I look at like target operating model transformation, so organizational structures, that involves a lot of sensitive data. You're looking at HR records, you're looking at wider salary data from sort of the industries, all these different parts that need to be taken in. You've got egos to account for, you've got personality differences, all of these different things. And don't get me wrong, AI can do that. It could be incredibly good at giving you their output. But in some places, especially in Germany, they are incredibly strict about using any personal data. So would you then be able to put this in there to even get the outputs? So
Great
I
point.
think it's going to be interesting to see. Yes, AI can help with consulting for specific parts probably, but there's also going to be that gaps, and that's why I think it will be augmented or sort of helping some of the consultants to get the outputs, or even your own business turning it on. But it won't be, at least in its current form. I'm sure this is the worst it's ever going to be, right? So it could do it in the future. I think what it will end up looking like is rather than sending 10 consultants in to do this entire transformation, we'll send three in with this tool and give you the output. And that's where it will be a lower cost for the business to get the output, and it will be a lower cost to serve from like a Deloitte, McKinsey, all these different ones, because they can get really good outputs powered and augmented by AI instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. But with that being said, I think we will wrap it up. I think this has been a really interesting hour and a bit of conversation, and I appreciate your time, Alex. And I'm sure you appreciate mine.
Definitely, definitely. No, it was a great one. I loved it. It was some really good discussion in there.
No, it was great. But this is the first of many. And I'm sure you'd like to plug our school community. If you want to do that right now, that would be great.
Yeah, definitely. If you're looking to transform your business with AI, understand what it is, how to use it, get your team actually trained in AI, whether that's using tools, the safety, the strategy, the governance, all of these different things that is actually getting the most out of AI, then come across to school/AI for business, all one word. The link will be down below as well, so you can find it nice and easily. And we can help you actually achieve that, get the most out of AI, and just fly with it.
Amazing. Well, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your energy. We understand that it is valuable. So we hope that you got some value out of this hour and a bit time that you spent with us. We hope you have a great week. We're going to try to do this at least once every 2 weeks. So subscribe or follow us on your relevant platform, and we'll be back soon. Thanks.
Definitely.